Hi, good morning, class. And we are the group who's going to report how to make an essay questions. I am Argel Dave Reed.
Sa Kapilo Nikki,
Talarok Jean Beth.
Now, our objectives in our reporting is first, to define the meaning of essay, understand the purpose of essay on test questionnaires, differentiate types of essay, understand the pros and cons of essay questionnaires, and know how to create an essay test questionnaires. Now to start, we would like to share a quote. Good writing gives energy, whatever it is about, by Marilyn Hacker.
good morning everyone. I am going to tackle about what is an essay item. An essay item is one for which the student supplies rather than selects the correct answer. The student must compose a response, often extensive, to a question for which no single response or pattern of responses can be cited as correct to the inclusion of all other answers. The accuracy and quality of such a response can often be judged only by a person skilled and informed in the subject area being tested. Essay items should measure complex cognitive skills or processes. Like objective test items, essay items may be well constructed or poorly constructed. The well constructed essay item aims to test complex cognitive skills by requiring the students to organize, integrate, and synthesize knowledge, to use information to solve novel problems, or to be original and innovative in problem solving. The poorly constructed essay item may require the students to do no more than recall information as if it was presented in the textbook or lecture. Worse, the poorly constructed essay may not even let the student know what is required for the satisfactory response, like our initial example in this chapter. Essay items should structure the student's response. The potential of the essay items as an evaluation device depends not only on writing appropriate questions that elicit complex cognitive skills, but also on being able to structure the student's response so that other factors do not obscure your ability to evaluate whether the student is applying the complex cognitive skills you are trying to measure. For example, differences is knowledge of factual material can be hidden by differences in ability to use and organize those facts. The time pressures of a test situation, student anxiety, and deficiencies in writing ability, which does not necessarily mean there are corresponding cognitive deficits, can all interfere with students' ability to demonstrate mastery of complex cognitive skills. A well-structured essay item will clearly indicate the cognitive skills or process that should be employed to formulate the answer, clarify ambiguous details, and set appropriate page or time limits. Well-constructed essays make it easier for you to evaluate accurately the student's response. Examples. Question number 1. What method have been used in the United States to prevent industrial accidents? What learning outcomes are being tested? To provide an acceptable answer, a student need only recall information. The item is at the knowledge level. No higher level mental processes are taped. It would be easy and much less time consuming to score a series of objective items covering the same topic. This is not abuse of the essay item, but it is a misuse. Now consider the second question. Question number 2. Examine the data provided in the table on causes of accidents. Explain how the introduction of occupational health and safety standards in the United States accounts for these changes in the number of industrial accidents shown in the following table. Be sure to consider at least 3 specific occupational health and safety standards in your response. Limit your response to one half page. For question number 2, the table shows the causes of accidents and rates for each in year 1980 and year 2000. Cause of accident and accident rate per 100,000 employees in year 1980 and 2000. Number 1 of cause of accident. Defective equipment. In year 1980, it has a rate of 135.1. In year 2000, 16.7. Number 2, failure to use safety-related equipment. In year 1980, 222.8, and for the year 2000, 36.1. Number 3, failure to heed instructions. In year 1980, 422.1, and year 2000, 128.6. Next is improperly trained for job. In year 1980, it has 598.7, and for the year 2000, 26.4. Lastly, medical or health-related impairments. In year 1980, it has 41.0, and in year 2000, 13.5. These questions requires that the student recall something about the occupational health and safety standards. Then, the students must relate these standards to such things as occupational training programs, plant safety inspections, the display of warning or danger signs, equipment manufacturing, codes related to safety, and so forth, which may have been incorporated in industrial settings between 1980 and year 2000. This item clarifies considerably what you are expecting from the student. In short, the student must use higher level mental processes to answer these questions successfully. The student must be able to analyze, infer, organize, apply, and so on. No objective item or series of items would suffice. This is an appropriate use of the essay item. However, not all essays are alike. We will consider two types of essay items. This is extended response and the restricted response items.
Types of essays, extended or restricted response. Essay items can vary from very lengthy, open-minded, open-ended end of semester term papers, or take-home tests that have flexible page limits. Example, 10 to 12 pages, no more than 20 pages, etc. To essays with responses limited or restricted to 1 page or less. The former are referred to as extended response essay items, and the latter is referred to as restricted response essay items. Essays may be used to measure general or specific outcomes of instruction. The restricted response item is most likely to be used to assess knowledge, comprehension, and application types of learning outcomes. An extended response essay is more appropriate to assess the ability to evaluate, synthesize, analyze, organize, and select viewpoints. Extended response essays. An essay item that allows the student to determine the length and complexity of response is called an extended response essay item. This type of essay is most useful at the synthesis or evaluation levels of the cognitive taxonomy. When we are interested in determining whether students can organize, integrate, express, and evaluate information, ideas, or knowledge, the extended response essay may be the best option. The extended response item also is useful for assessing written communication ability. The following is an example of an extended response essay. Example: identify as many ways to generate electricity as you can. Give the advantages and disadvantages of each and how each might be used to meet the electrical power requirements of a medium-sized city. Your response will be graded on its accuracy and your evaluation of how practical each source of electricity would be if implemented. Your response should be 12 to 15 pages in length and will be evaluated based on the scoring criteria distributed in class. Your maximum credit, be sure that your response addresses each of the scoring criteria components. To respond to this essay, the student must be able to 1. Assemble relevant information. 2. Critically analyze the information. 3. Apply it to a novel situation synthesized to evaluate potential outcomes. Obviously, responding to this complex task is not something you would expect students to be able to do within a single class period or without access to suitable reference materials. Nevertheless, this may be an important set of skills that you need to evaluate. If so, the extended range essay can work well. Keep in mind, however, that a complex item like this will take time to develop and will be even more time consuming to score. It is also difficult to score extended response essays objectively. For both these reasons, it is important to use extended range essays only in those situations where you have adequate time to develop the extended response item and specific scoring criteria for it, and when your students have adequate time and resources to devote to their responses. Later in this chapter, we will provide you with a variety of suggestions that you can use to develop and score both extended and restricted response items. Restricted response essays. An essay item that poses a specific problem for which the student must recall proper information, organize it in a suitable manner, derive a defensible conclusion, and express it within the limit of the post problem or within page or time limit is called a restricted response essay item. The statement of the problem specifies response limitations that guide the student in responding and provide evaluation criteria for scoring. Example: list the major political similarities and differences between U.S. participation in the Korean War and World War II. Limit your answer to one page. Your score will depend on accuracy, organization, and brevity. Typically, a restricted response essay item may supplement a test that is otherwise objective, or there are several restricted response items in an essay test designed to be completed during a class period. When several essay items are used, students may be expected to respond to them with or without various resources, depending on your instructional objectives. The classroom teacher will use restricted response essays far more often and that extended response essays. Thus, in the next section, we will focus primarily on suggestions to help you develop and score restricted range essays. Nevertheless, you will find almost all these suggestions will also be applicable should you choose to use extended range essays. We will consider several examples of restricted range essays next. Examples of restricted response essays. Example 1. The Learning to Like It company is proposing profit sharing for its employees. For each 1% increase in production compared to the average production figures over the past 10 years, workers will get a 1% increased pay. In no more than one page, list the advantages and disadvantages to the workers of this plan. List the advantages and disadvantages to the corporation of this plan. Example 2. Now that we've studied about gold rush, imagine you are on a wagon train going to California. Write a one-page letter to your relatives back home telling them of some of the A. Hardships you have suffered, and B. Dangers you have experienced. To demonstrate that they know the advantages and disadvantages of profit sharing and the hardships and dangers of traveling west by wagon train during the gold rush, your learners must do two things. They must respond to their own words and not simply recall what the text said or what they copied from an overhead, and they must give original examples. If they can do this, then you can correctly say that your learners have acquired the concept of profit sharing and understood the difficulties of traveling west during the gold rush. When should restricted response be considered? The following describes some of the conditions for which restricted response questions best suited. 1. The instructional objectives require supplying rather than simply recognizing information. 2. Relatively few areas of content need to be tested. Use restricted when class size is small, or use them in conjunction with objective items. 3. Test security is a consideration. If you are afraid multiple choice test questions will be passed on or told to other students, it is better to use a restricted response questions.
Now we proceed to guide in making essay questions. And these are the guides on how to create them effectively. And we're going to tackle i- some important parts, but I hope not to consume a longer of time. But first is we have Bloom's revised taxonomy. It's very important for us to revisit. Next is most essential competencies provided by the Department of Education. Third is the application of table of specification. Fourth part is essay question formulation. Fifth is the rubric. And the sixth part is scoring or point system. Now, I would minimize my PowerPoint and would like to share first the PDF of Bloom's taxonomy. As we've discussed on the previous lessons about Bloom's taxonomy, this employs the level of difficulty of learners' learning process, in which we study on the revised portion, in which we could able to develop cognitive objectives that we wanted our students to develop. Of course, this is developed by Benjamin Bloom. It means expressing qualitatively different kinds of thinking, being adapted for classroom use as a planning tool, continues to be one of the most universally applied models, provides a way to organize thinking skills into 6 levels. Um, as a result, a number of changes were made. No. This is the comparison between the original terms and the new terms, and we would like to focus on the new terms, in which we have the remembering on the lowest order thinking skill. We have understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Now, this is the definition of the Bloom's revised taxonomy on the levels of order thinking. Now, below we have the lower order thinking skill. We have remembering, recalling information, such as recognizing, listing, describing, retrieving, naming, and finding. Next is understanding, explaining ideas or concepts such as interpreting, summarizing, paraphrasing, classifying, explaining. Third is we have applying, using information in another familiar situation, implementing, carrying out, using, and executing. Now, we go to the higher order thinking of skills. We have analyzing, such as comparing, organizing, deconstructing, interrogating, finding, evaluating, checking, hypothesizing, critiquing, experimenting, and judging. And the highest of them all is creating, designing, constructing, planning, producing, and inventing. Now, these are the cognitive dimension process. This is very important for us to discuss. It's because essay could be adjusted and could be applied onto any levels of cognitive dimension process. Now, first is you have recognizing, which is alternative name is identifying. So in definition, locating knowledge in long-term memory that is consistent with the present material. Recalling or retrieving relevant knowledge from long-term memory. And level 2, we have understanding. So we have these levels: interpreting, exemplifying, classifying, summarizing, inferring, comparing, explaining. Now, in interpreting, changing from one form of representation to another, such as paraphrasing a particular statement according to the learner's understanding, or translating a particular line of a movie in which they would write it into an essay. Okay. Next is we have the most common example of them all, the exemplifying, um, such as finding a specific example for illustrating of a concept or principle. I guess you are very familiar with questions such as give an example of, in which you are required, or we require the students to give an example and an explanation about the explanation that they cited, example that they cited. Now, we have the level 3. We have the executing and implementing, applying a procedure to a familiar task, and applying to a procedure to an unfamiliar task. We have analyzing, differentiating, organizing, and attributing. We have checking, coordinating, detecting, monitoring, and testing. Then we have critiquing, or the judging. Now we have the highest, the creating. So we have generating, planning, and producing. So in generating, coming up with alternative hypotheses based on criteria. Planning, devising a procedure for accomplishing some task. Then we have producing, inventing a product. Now for a quick reviewer, these are our 4 knowledge dimensions: factual knowledge, conceptual knowledge, procedural knowledge, and metacognitive knowledge. Now, these are the potential activities according to the levels of thinking level. In remembering, the potential activities and products are: make a list of the main events of the story. So if we wanted our students to respond in this question, we can transform them into an essay question that addresses to the level of remembering. Again, essay question is highly adaptive to any levels if questions are stated accurately and according to the objectives, such as make a timeline of events in which the students could write, or make a facts chart, write a list of any pieces of information that you can remember, what animals were in the story, what make a chart showing, make an acrostic, or recite a poem. Now, understanding, what are the potential activities, such as drawing pictures, illustration of an idea, making a cartoon strip, write or perform a play based on the story, retell the story on their own words, write a summary report, and so on and so forth. Now, applying potential activities, such as constructing a model to demonstrate how it works, make a diorama to illustrate an event, make a scrapbook, make a paper mash map or clay model to include relevant information about an event, write a textbook, dress a doll, make a clay model, paint a mural, or design a marketing strategy. Analyzing, design a questionnaire to gather information if this is research related, write a commercial to sell the new product if it's related to business and marketing, make a flow chart to show critical stages, especially in sciences, for example, human development, Construct a graph to illustrate select information. Make a family tree showing relationships of relatives. Devise a play, write a biography, prepare a report, conduct investigation, and review a work art in terms of form, color, and texture. And we have evaluating, prepare a list of criteria to judge, conduct a debate about an issue of special interest, make a booklet, form a panel, write a letter, write a half-yearly report, or prepare keys to present your view. And we have the creating. We have inventing a machine, designing a building, creating a new product, write about your feelings, write a TV or play, design a record, sell an idea, devise a way, or make a new language to use it as an example. But I'm pretty sure that some of you are asking this. With this level of higher order thinking skills and each activity that responds to it, how can we create questions, especially for essay, that captures that specific level in which we expect students to acquire such level of competency? Now, these are the questions for remembering, such as what happened after a significant event that happened in the country, or how many characters were there in the movie. So we would like to uh, let our learners to remember how many characters were there in the movie that they watch. What is the name of the leading um, actor, or who was it that? So it's much more on remembering. Uh, can you name an important event in the Philippine history? Find the meaning of. Okay. Describe what happened after. Who spoke to? Which is true or false? So these are just the guide questions for remembering, and they could be used as a form of essay. Questions for understanding. So these are the examples. Can you write in your own words? How would you explain? Can you write a brief outline? What do you think could have happened next? Who do you think? What is the main idea? Can you clarify? Can you illustrate? Does everyone act in the way? Does? Questions for applying. Do you know of another instance where? Can you group by characteristics such as? Which factors would you change if? What questions would you ask of? From the information given, can you develop a set of instructions about? Question for analyzing. Which events could not have happened? If happened, what might the ending have been? How is familiar to? What do you see as the other possible outcomes? Why did changes occur? Can you explain what must have happened when? What are some our problems of? Can you distinguish between? What were some motives behind? What was the turning point? What was the problem with? Now, questions for evaluating. These are the following. Is there a better solution to? Judge the value of? Can you defend your position about? And so on and so forth. Now, questions for creating. Can you design a? Can you see a possible solution? If you had access to all resources, how would you deal with? Why don't you devise your own way to? Now, if you're going to see these questions, they are much more on focusing onto the levels of how we wanted the learners to retain such level of knowledge. If we wanted them to remember, as you notice, the question is paraphrased simply. addressing to how they could remember and what they could remember. In understanding, it's much more on what are the things that they understood in the entirety of the lesson or of the activity. Now for applying, it gives them the chance to see the real situation in event in which they could apply a solution or um look at certain conditions in which it would be changed and how they would try to see with these changes according to an expected output, or analyzing. This is giving more of a deeper um, understanding by differentiating, distinguishing, and looking at other possible outcomes if these certain conditions could have changed. And they're going to present their alternative analysis or a possible out based on possible outcome. Now for evaluating, this gives the chance for the learners to see what is good and bad, to address what is concerning and to improve what is existing. Or they could provide any recommendation according to a particular case that you provided on your question. And for creating, this gives the chance for the student to be explorative, to create a product in which addresses a particular problem or to address a bigger issue in which they could draw out significance from their concepts to the ability that they could create based on evaluation and judgment in such a way that they could respond to make things better or to see the reality that is improved according to what they could do. Now, it's very important for us to revisit Bloom's taxonomy because here we will understand that our questions must be guided on these principles, because we have to appreciate that these are learning processes in which essay could be placed here, from creating, evaluating, analyzing, applying, understanding, and remembering. Now that we reviewed Bloom's taxonomy, we go on most essential competencies, and it's a very good basis because in depth ed we wanted to be guided on how we could create. Now, for example, we have here the entrepreneurship. Now, an entrepreneurship, we understand that the most essential topics according to the depth ed is discuss the relevance of the course, analyze the market need, and explore job opportunities for entrepreneurship as a career. Now, for learning objectives, again, we appreciate these three levels. We have the cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. Now, teachers could create and identify these cognitive, affective, and psychomotor objectives according to the essential topics in which we wanted our learners to develop at the end of a module or at the end of a semester. Now, in order to create your learning objectives, it must be related to or taken from the essential topics. After identifying these learning objectives, we can now then go to table of specification. Now, this is an example of table of specification, a simplified one. So usually tests are scattered according to the levels of remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Remembering our discussion about Bloom's taxonomy onto the levels of cognitive processes. Now, I'm sure that other groups have discussed the types of questions from true or false, multiple choice identification, in which they could also innovate onto the levels of either remembering, understanding, applying, or evaluating or creating. Now, it could also fall to any levels of cognitive level, from remembering, understanding, applying, evaluating. This is according to the design of the teacher of the table of specification, according to the objectives identified on the learning objectives, which is taken from the essential topics. Okay? Now, let's say we want to evaluate and create. Let's say specifically evaluate. And here, we would like to tackle, analyze the market need and explore job opportunities for entrepreneurship as a career. Okay, take a note of that. It is one of the essential topics. Now, in order to draw out the essential topics to learning objectives, we create these cognitive levels, such as explain the concept of entrepreneurship, discuss the development, analyze entrepreneurship, differentiate, explain, and so on and so forth. But what we wanted to target is, according to table of specification of evaluating, we wanted our students to analyze a market need, for an instance. Then we want them to analyze entrepreneurship and development in the society. Okay. Now, in order to transform the level of analyzing, because you might be wondering, sir, you wanted evaluating, but it doesn't address here in applying and analyzing. We could then transform the question into an evaluation. Now here, given on your test exam, in essay, you can ask a question. How can entrepreneurial business innovate products or service in addressing the COVID-19 pandemic? Now, in this question, we don't only require students to analyze a business in COVID-19, but we are requiring them to evaluate on how entrepreneurial businesses provide innovative products or services in addressing the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, how is this question then related to the most essential learning competency? We try to look at here, analyze the market need. But then again, we are reminded that in every lesson that we wanted to impart to our students, there must be the sense of a real world application in which allows them to see their surrounding and their environment and relate their learnings towards that particular event in analyzing economic development in the society, which reminds us that we are still on this current condition. In this level of question, we allow students first to be aware of the socio-economic conditions according that is under COVID-19 pandemic. Second is we allow learners to have a deeper grasp of entrepreneurial businesses according to its description, according to its understanding, according to its lesson delivery, in which we capture the significance of innovative of products or service, giving it as a center of innovation. Now, the question is, can student tie this up and provide an answer? Yes, by transforming the question on how. Again, how can entrepreneurial businesses innovate products or services in addressing the COVID-19 pandemic? Now, this is on the essay formulation, but I would tell you, essay question formulation would take time. There is trial and error actually. You could never create a question that would be correct right away. It takes a discussion among co-teachers. It requires a lot of time to revisit and to restudy the objectives that we identified. And it requires for us to have the sense of of awareness to how can students respond to this essay question in which it would retain to their learning capabilities or learn long-term impact. No? Now, after you provided the essay, then it is very important that to provide an essay rubric. Why? Because this translates into a numerical representation on how students performed in answering the essay. Now, this is just an example. So you have 1 point, readable, structured according to required number of sentence. So this kind of rubric addresses the long term and the short term according to the instruction. Second, fluent, sentences are clear and complete. 3 points, fit for reading and appraisal, sentences are relevant and coherent. 4 points, aim, sentences are well organized to target post question. And 5 points, faultless, has strong informative body. Now going back to the presentation, again, that's how you try to create your essay. First is base everything on Bloom's revised taxonomy as what our group has discussed. Next is visit most essential competencies by DepEd. Third is looking at table of specification in which we would like to place our question, especially essay. Fourth is essay question formulation onto the level of thinking or cognitive level process. Then you have the rubric to measure, and we have the scoring or the point system. This ends our discussion, and thank you very much for listening. Have a nice day.